Okay, so
Hi, I'm Rob Brooks, and
this is my first PechaKucha, so just bear with me. So I'm talking to you about Twitter sentiment analysis, which is something I'm working on at university, which is a way of looking into the information on Twitter, the invisible information on Twitter, in an interesting way. A way of
speak up.
Sorry, can you hear that better?
Yes.
Okay, so Twitter sentiment analysis is quite an interesting thing, and I saw a tweet recently which was about how a guy was talking about using Twitter to let his psychiatrist sort of see what he was saying on Twitter to then work out what pills to send him, because you could gauge your emotion through Twitter. I found that quite interesting. But there's also some research that's been done into how the stock market or the Dow Jones Average Index can be sort of guessed 3 days in advance by using Twitter sentiment analysis. So they gauge the average sentiment in the US on Twitter, and it correlated to the stock exchange. But this information could be used in other ways. So if you could gauge if someone's happy or sad, could you not target advertisements at it? Could you not find out if a particular area or a town is sad and target happy sort of, I don't know, sort of mail outs and stuff like that? It's silly, but it's little ways of using the data that are quite interesting. So I don't know if anyone's seen this, but this is a Facebook friend network graph. And I was interested in how Twitter sentiment could be sort of visualized like this. So could you map Twitter sentiment or graph it in a particular way to find out whether there's correlations and how are those correlations sort of happening and are they that interesting? And there's been some work into this already. So there was a US research project which was called Pulse of the Nation, and this sort of looked into sentiment across an entire day period and how it changes across states in the US. And this is an animated graph, there's a video of it online. And it was just really interesting to see how the sentiment changed across the day in one country. There's also Flip, which was recently acquired, I believe. And this was a review system that was based on Twitter sentiment analysis. So it took tweets that people put out about movies and guessed what positivity there was towards that movie instead of people submitting actual reviews. So there's another project which was not with Twitter, but this was to look into mapping with sentiment, and you sort of manually on the iPhone said, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm feeling like this, and it would plot it on a map and it would sort of visualise happiness across the UK, which I found really interesting. So this was something I was looking into, and I was working at an internship at a company called Red Web in Bournemouth, and we constructed this project called The Spirit of Christmas. And this was using Twitter. We analysed how people were feeling about Christmas. So we were seeing if they had good Christmas spirit, bad Christmas spirit, all that kind of stuff. And at the end of each day, if it was positive Christmas spirit, one of the staff members got a Ferrero Rocher. At the end of the day, if it was a bad Christmas spirit, they had a Brussels sprout. So we used things like Arduino as well to bring this into the physical world to see how sort of people reacted to it. But it was an interesting use of the data, and it didn't really take much work to get there. So where I'm going now with this is looking at the UK specifically. So I've sort of done the whole of Twitter with the Christmas spirit, and I wanted to look into just tweets in the UK and can you find correlations between particular areas in the UK or times in the UK where sentiment changes. But I didn't want to use basic sort of this is a happy word, this is a sad word kind of thing, like I did with the Spirit of Christmas project. So I decided to use a data set from Florida University, which is sort of academically sound, and it's not necessarily proper sentiment, but it's the best sort of data I can get at the moment. So I tied this in with technologies like Twitter for gathering the raw data, Node.js for like sort of doing the data analysis and sort of the core sort of crunching, MongoDB for storing the data and then getting it back at a later stage. So it was three sort of interesting technologies, and they ended up with producing maps like this. So this is a map of the UK that I produced with Twitter sentiment. It's not that refined yet. The red dots, it's a bit blurry, but the red dots are sort of unhappy, negative sentiment, and the green dots are positive sentiment, and the sort of colours in between sort of make up the sentiment between them. But what was more interesting was dropping the geographic data and turning it into a graph, which was just mapping sentiment at all. So this was Valentine's Day, As you can see, a negative trend across the entire day, which is interesting. But fairly positive in the middle, so maybe they were looking forward to seeing a loved one. Saturday, this was a weekend period, the Saturday morning is incredibly happy, which I can understand. It's no more work, it's waking up Saturday morning, you've got the whole weekend ahead of you. Monday afternoon and Monday evening is massively negative, so perhaps there's something in this data. So while I was out in Mozilla recently, and I did a talk about this sentiment analysis stuff, and I analysed some of the Mozilla employees right in front of them, and this was Christian Harmon, he's my boss actually, and he's got a fairly negative trend on his tweets. And this was another staff member called Pascal Fournette, and he has a positive trend, and that was fortunate because his wife was in the room when I was giving the presentation. So she was comparing dates and the negative points to see if that correlated with anything. I quickly changed the slide after that. But there was something more profound in this data, and by analysing the entire UK, I found that there was a sentiment heartbeat of sorts, and particular times of the day when there's less tweets happening. The sentiment sort of goes wild, and I was trying to work out why that was happening, and I'm looking into this for my dissertation. Now, I don't have an answer to this yet, but I hope that kind of shows how this data is quite interesting, and this kind of analysis needs to be looked into. So hopefully we'll see how it goes, and it should be all right. We'll see what happens.